Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Craig Harris Fishing. So in a comment on a few videos back, I got a request for a rod and reel arsenal, like a 2019 rod and reel arsenal video. So that's my plan today, is to kind of show you what I'm using, why I'm using it, and what I'm doing with it. As you can see, I have all my rods here on the wall behind me. There's only a few that I use. A couple are my wives. There's a few ice fishing rods on the bottom. So just bear with me. This is my messy garage of just packed full of stuff. But stay tuned and we'll go through these one at a time here for you. So this rod here is an Abu Garcia Vendetta. It's paired with a Cast King. It's their Speed Demon, which is a 9:3-to-1 gear ratio reel. The reason I have this rod set up currently on an Alabama rig is that it's a Vendetta medium heavy, but this thing is like a broomstick, in my opinion. I have it paired with 65-pound braid, and I was throwing an Alabama rig at the end of last season. This is actually my frog rod, and I will put a leader. I'll tie an Albright's knot to a fluorocarbon leader for big swim baits. Not something I use specifically, and it's very specific for heavy gear. This is 65-pound braid, Seagar 832 on it. I just run the natural green braid, and like I said, currently it has a 3-hook Alabama rig on it. I'll also use this for frogging, which is primarily my main rod for frogging. This is the one I go to if I know I'm going to a lake that has a frog bite, or that I'm going to be throwing a frog for. So that's this rod specifically. That's what I use it for. This Speed Demon is a fast reel gear ratio. It's 9:3-to-1. It's a cheaper reel. It's plastic, I believe. But the reason I bought it is because it's such a fast reel. When the frog when they blow up on the frog at the top, I want to be able to rip them out of those pads or rip them out of the weeds as quick as I possibly can and get them back to the boat. So that's why I'm using this reel. That's also why I'm using 65-pound braid. I do happen to throw an Alabama rig on it, and I do throw big swim baits on it when I'm throwing them. That's not something I'm really good at, and it's not something I use specifically right now. But this is the rod and reel for my frogging setup. Oh, this is also a 7'6" medium heavy. Next up is a Kistler light medium heavy. This is paired, it's a 7-foot rod paired with a Shimano Corrado DC. It's a newer Corrado that's out. This is 12-pound test. I'm using this rod and reel for Texas rig, light Texas rig, my smaller jigs sometimes. I'll end up throwing cranking because it's 12-pound InvizX on here. I'll throw cranks on this as well occasionally if it's a bigger crank, some of your wiggle warts, stuff of that nature. But this is predominantly a Texas rig rod for me, or a 1/4 to 3/8 ounce jig rod. Mostly what I'm using it for. I guess I throw traps on this occasionally as well. So just depends on how many rods I have and how technique specific I have to get when I'm co-angling. This next rod up is a Kistler Mag 2 as well. It's a medium fast action, and it is a 7-foot. Just a standard medium rod, a little whippy. This is paired with a Lew's Speed Spool Mach 2, and I have on here 20-pound Seagar 832, and it's paired with a 10-pound mono leader. I use this one commonly for topwater baits, spooks, poppers, things of that nature. I throw the 20-pound the 20-pound braid on the back of it because I don't like to have a mono specific rod. I don't throw topwater enough for me to warrant having a rod that's just specifically for topwater. So what I'll commonly do is I'll keep this one with braid on it, 20-pound braid, and then tie a mono leader with an Albright's knot as well. And I like this rod for topwater, but if I'm using it for something else, I'm going to be throwing Texas rig. This is a medium rod and 20-pound braid. A lot of times I'll throw a chatterbait on this as well, because if I'm throwing a chatterbait or a reaction bait, also my medium diving swim baits, stuff like that, then the braid is fine on a reaction style bait. I don't have any problems with it personally. So this is the rod that I go to if I'm going to be using, like I said, topwater, or if it's just straight braid, it's going to be chatterbaits or bigger swim baits, 3 and 4 inch swim baits. All right, this next rod up is another Kistler. It's another medium fast, medium action rod, 7 foot again. So again, the Mag 2, all of the spinning gear that I have, minus my frog rod, is the Mag 2 by Kistler. I like the rod. It's real nice. I like the EVA foam. Everything about it's pretty good for me, and it handles well. I really appreciate the sensitivity on it and everything. So with this rod though, I currently have a popper tied on because I was out testing on a lake. It is 10 pound InvizX, so it sinks naturally. The popper isn't really good because the line sinks, so it keeps pulling the nose of the popper down. I was just testing something on a lake when I was out most recently during my previous practice video. So what I use this for commonly, because it is a whippy rod, is I'm throwing a jerkbait on this. This is 10 pound, it's a jerkbait. I'm also throwing KVD, like the Strike King 2.5s and 1.5s, the small square bills, things of that nature, things that aren't going super deep. I want those crankbaits to get down a little bit deeper, so 10 pound InvizX, and the nice flexible tip on this rod gives me that opportunity to be able to get that treble hook in and then keep it in there when the fish is jumping and everything. So I like this specifically for reaction baits. I'm fishing jerk baits on it. I'm fishing light crankbaits, small stuff like that. But I also throw a shaky head on this, and I'll throw small tubes or 1/4 ounce jigs. Like my light gear goes on here. It's almost basically a finesse version of a casting rod for me. This is paired with Daiwa Tatula, 7.3 gear ratio, left-handed. Everything I have is left-handed. I got used to fishing spinning reels, so I'm just used to reeling left-handed. I'm going to finish out my casting gear before I actually go to my spinning gear. I'm more of a finesse fisherman, but I do have these 5 casting rods, 6 if you count my frog rod, that I do like to stick with specifically if I'm heading out. A lot of them, like I said, are specific. I do rotate between a few different baits on them, but they all have a specific purpose in my mind. This is a medium heavy, or a light medium heavy, 7-foot Kistler Mag 2 again, paired again with that Shimano Corrado DC. And it is a 8-to-1 gear ratio, I believe. It doesn't actually say on here, but I'm pretty sure it's an 8-to-1. The reason for that, this is my jig rod. It's 15 pound Abrazex by Seagar is what I'm throwing straight on this rod and reel. You'll see me throwing Kitech jigs. It's my favorite at this time. You see, it's basically the golden rule of jigs at this point in my career, I guess. A lot of times it'll either be that, if I'm not throwing the Kitech, I'll be throwing a Tackle Supply Depot tungsten jig head as well. Make them in 1/2 ounce. They're nice football head. I like them a lot. So between those two, but this is predominantly my jig rod. This is what I'm going to. If you see me throwing a jig, it's on this Corrado DC. It makes it a lot easier for skipping, makes it a lot easier just in casting in general. Casting in the wind, this DC does accommodate for all of that. I think it's one of the best reels out there for the money at this point. Other than that Daiwa Tatula, I really do like that as well. Between those two, I think that'll be the only reels I have. The Lewis Mach 2 was a impulse purchase that went along with the green EVA foam of the Mag 2s here. But anyway, this is what I'm using for jigging. I don't throw much else on this. If I have limited rods and reels and I was throwing a large heavy beaver or a Texas rig of some sort, something in that 3/8 to 1/2 ounce rig, I would throw it on here if I didn't take a bunch of rod and reels. But really, you don't see the jig come off of this rod at any point, honestly. So unless, like I said, unless I have a limited rod and reel, if I've only brought 2 or 3 rods, you may see me alternate to a heavier Texas rig, like I said, a beaver, or that the Guggen Squad bait, the Bandito bug, I'll throw on this rod. But it's uncommon that you see me take the jig off of this. To follow up on that last comment, this is a medium heavy. It's 7'3". It's again that Kistler Mag 2, Daiwa Tatula 7.3. I have a frog on this currently, and the reason being is I was out on a little pond, taking a pond mission, and fishing some pads. I didn't take my frog specific rod because when you're fishing a pond on foot, you can't have specific rods for everything. So this is 20 pound 832 by Suffix 832 braid, again green. It's 20 pound. I was just using this to frog some pads when I was pond hopping. So this is one of those situations where I said I didn't have a specific rod. I didn't have my frog rod. So what do you do when you don't have it? You tie it onto something that's not as powerful. This is a semi-light rod. It's a medium heavy, but it's not the same medium heavy as that broomstick up there. So I like this rod specifically. Again, I'll throw a chatterbait on this, like heavier chatterbaits. I'm throwing heavier reaction baits on this. Half-ounce spinner baits, half-ounce chatterbaits. Some of your Picasso swing head chatterbaits or the hair jigs or the Z-Man jackhammers. That's what's going on this if I am on my heavier end. If I'm throwing less than 3/8 or somewhere in that range, 3/8, 1/4, I'm going to go to a lighter rod and a light medium heavy. The medium heavy is specifically for my half-ounce and above style baits. I really like this rod specifically for those things. And again, commonly you'll see me throwing it on some of the Finger Lakes. If I'm throwing a chatterbait, it's almost always going to be on this specific rod and reel combo. The Tatula handles it fine, and the medium heavy 7.3 gets it out there far enough for me. Alright guys, on to my spinning gear. This is the very first rod that I bought when I first started actually fishing and trying to fish a little bit better, fish more specific. I learned on a spinning rod. I'm sure most people do. So this rod I bought originally for drop shot. It's 7'4". I run 10 pound high vis Suffix 832 on here. I run a 7 pound Sunline Sniper fluorocarbon leader. And I originally bought this rod for drop shot. This rod has since become something different because you'll commonly see me link this KVD rod in the description below. This is my little swim bait rod. 2.8 inch Kitech. This is on a Cabin Creek jig head. I also use Tackle Supply Depot's tungsten jig heads. They have a little light wire finesse jig head that's a round ball and it's tungsten. Great deal, great price on it. So I like to go there as well if I can. But I also got these Cabin Creek ones there. It just sits really nice. That little Kitech sits nice on this rod and reel. And honestly, if I'm not throwing this tiny Kitech, this is specifically so I can make a long cast at 7'4". I want to be able to chuck this thing out. And then I want to drag it as slow as I can. You see me using this rod with small tubes, small Kitechs, 2.8, 3.3s, max. And I'll use this with net heads. You'll see me dragging this thing around. And that's basically the only thing I'm putting on this rod anymore. Alright, this next rod that's up is my drop shot rod. Drop shot never leaves this rod. It's the only thing I throw on this rod under any scenario. This is a Villain 2.0. It is a 7'3" medium by Abu Garcia. Attached to it is a Revo Rocket. Again, the Suffix 832 braid paired with an Albright's knot to Sniper by Sunline 7 pound Sniper. I don't take drop shot off this rod. It is my finesse rod. It is the go-to drop shot rod that I have. Now the setup is a little more expensive. I think the rod runs about 200. The Revo Rocket probably runs about 200 as well, but it is just the best. Drag smooth. It's perfect for handling those big smallies in late summer. And like I said, I fish this on weed beds as well. But if I'm throwing it on a weed bed, I'll take this Skinny Bear hook off, and what I'll do is I'll end up trading this out for a Roboworm hook. I fish that little light wire finesse hook with the bait keeper on the back, and I'll throw it Texas rigged at that point. I don't like to. It's a light rod, and unless I'm poking through light grass, I'm typically 9 times out of 10 throwing this little Skinny Bear hook. I get that from Tackle Warehouse. They're the only people that carry it that I could find it, but this is a 1/0 Skinny Bear hook. I think it might be called an octopus hook or a Nico hook, maybe. It's made by Skinny Bear. Only place I can get it, though, at this time. So this on here right now that you're seeing is the Brown Gill. It's the Guggen Squad's Dragon Drop that was premiered in my last video, maybe. It's the practice video from Harvey's Lake. Alright guys, up next is another Villain. This is a medium light. It's a 7-foot medium light by Abu Garcia. And there is a very specific reason why I have a second one of these. In a prior video from last year, 2018, I snapped a rod. The title of the video, I believe, is called Rod Snaps. I snapped a villain, this specific make and model of a villain, like last year, probably about 16 months ago now at this point. So the video's up, you can go watch it, but basically I tried to flip a 2-pound smallie and snap the rod about one eyelet down. The reason I have a second one of these now is because I paid $10. Abu was kind enough to replace it for me after I'd only had it for about a year. I have a second one purely by accident. I needed it for the tournament. I went out and bought another one immediately because that was my drop shot rod that I snapped that smallie off on. And I went out and bought it specifically because I needed it for a tournament coming up, and I had to have it immediately. And I didn't have time for Abu to get back to me and replace it. So fortunately, after they replaced it, I do have another second one of these. I happened to get this Stratus here by Okuma. Wow, find your words, Craig. Stratus by Okuma. It was on sale at Dick's. Is the only reason I have this. It's a cheaper reel. I think it's about 30 bucks. I got 2 of them. You'll see it on my next rod as well, because I had to replace an old loose carbon fire as well. When it comes to skipping, I don't use a heavy rod or a really high-end reel because I'm throwing under docks, I'm slapping it around, it's getting beat up a lot. But in this case, I just had an extra rod. I had an extra villain. So now, what do I use this for? Again, Ned rig. This is again 832 braid, high-vis braid to Sunline Sniper, 7-pound fluoro, tied again with an Albright's knot. And I'm using this for Ned rig. This is basically a backup rod. I'll drop shot with this. I'll throw that little Kitech with this. I'll throw a Ned rig with this. I'll throw a shaky head on this. I'll throw small tubes on this. This is just kind of like a catch-all. I happen to have an extra one, so I slapped a cheap reel on it just so I had it to use if I needed it for some reason. Or, God forbid, another rod breaks or something like that. I have a usable rod for drop shot if I had to, especially, again, if my main one broke. To be honest, if I broke that other rod, I would probably just take the reel off and put the Revo Rocket on here, because the Rocket's just a faster reel. It's easier to catch up with big smallies deep, stuff like that. Or if a largie turns and runs at the boat for some reason, the Revo Rocket's a high-speed gear ratio, where this is not. This is a much slower gear ratio compared to it, so I want to be able to catch up if I need to. But that's what I use this one for. Last but not least of my 2019 arsenal is a cheap rod. This is an Escalade. I don't even know who makes it, to be honest with you. It's a 6'6", medium heavy. So what I'm using this for, it's Quantum Escalade. I got it at Dick's. I also got this Okuma at Dick's, which is the same one that I just showed you in my last rod and reel. Anyway, 6'6", I'm using this for one reason and one reason only. I'm throwing Senkos on it, basically. Sometimes on the river you'll see me, because this is a cheap rod and reel, I don't want to take a good rod and reel to the Susquehanna River and get beat up. So you'll see me throw like tubes and stuff on this. But in actual tournament fishing on real lakes, I'm throwing this with a Senko. You may see this rod and reel with a Texas rig Senko or a Rage rig with a belly-weighted hook Senko. Depends if I'm fishing weeds or docks or what's going on at the time. But I really use this specifically for skipping. It's 6'6". I'm only 5'7". I'm a short guy. It's easier to skip with a smaller rod. So that's why I use this one. But this is a catch-all. I mean, if I was just throwing a cheap rod, this Escalade's nice. It's been beat up. I've had this everywhere and had no problems with it. Eyes are good. Everything's great with it. So, I mean, for a cheaper rod, if I was just going to buy something that I could use anywhere and do anything with and beat the crap out of it and not worry about it, this would be it. Quantum Escalade. The Stratus was 30 bucks. It works great. I've had nothing but good things to say about it by Okuma. And this is 15-pound Suffix 832 and a 15-pound Abrase X. Alright guys, well that's my 2019 rod and reel arsenal. I have a few other ones up here, but they're not stuff I use, not stuff I take. So it's no sense in going into detail about those. They always just stay on the wall. I probably should just get rid of them, but I have a bad habit of just keeping things around. But thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. If you have the time, hit that thumbs up button down below and subscribe to the channel. And until then, just roll that music.